Council, we're moving on to the agenda, and I want to welcome everyone to the September 17th regular meeting of Council. First item is the adoption of the minutes of September the 5th, 2018. I need a mover and a seconder for adoption. Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Powell. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Next, I need approval of the agenda, that the September 17th council meeting agenda be approved. I have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Powell. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Does the item 6A on our agenda require removal in light of the letter that Council received earlier today? And if so, would this be the appropriate time to remove it from the agenda?
I'll bring it up when we come to item 6A, if you're agreeable to that. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so this is the approval of the agenda of September 17th. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Moving on to new business. I want to remind everybody that there's a special council meeting on Monday, September the 24th, a week from tonight, regarding cannabis legislation and the amended 2018 financial plan. Coffee with Council has two remaining sessions on September 20th and October 4th, respectively. And we are now back to Stage 2 watering restrictions. Thank God for the rain. Stage 1 water restrictions will come into effect on October the 1st. I want to talk a little bit about UBCM, but I'm going to go around the table and let others speak first. So I'm going to start on my left with Councillor Oates and move left to right. Councillor Oates.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I hope I don't cover something that you're probably going to cover, but I did have the pleasure last week of attending UBCM in Whistler with yourself, Councillor Burden and Councillor Beal and Councillor Salter. Interestingly enough, the three main topics of discussion up there were many seminars on it, were the opioid crisis, affordable housing, and public safety. So, what I've learned is that there's not a lot of communities that are not faced with the same sort of challenges that we are. I do want to note, though, that there were numerous times when, in particular, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Selena Robinson, when she was addressing the group, they spoke about the initiative that Parksville is undertaking here, and in a good way, and talked about how we were leading the way. So it was good to hear Parksville mentioned in that light. What was not surprising, I guess, was the number of communities that are faced with public safety issues as a result of this opioid crisis, and how the lines are being blurred between a criminal problem and a health medical problem. And all the communities are struggling with the same thing that we're struggling with here. I think it's very important that we delineate between street people that are criminals and people that are homeless through no fault of their own. I think that the former sometimes affects the amount of compassion we're able to afford the latter, and I think that's an important consideration to always keep in mind. As always, a lot of the sessions were concurrent. It was hard to get to them all, but I'm pretty sure between all of us we covered all the sessions. I know Councillor Beal is going to give me some information on public safety a little later on from the bylaw session that she went through. But we're not alone in our problems and our struggles, and what we're doing is as good as anybody else is doing. We picked up a few ideas and tips with respect to bylaws that we might want to consider at some time in the future. But this is very much a living document, these problems with respect to opioid and housing, and it's a tough situation to be in, but it's good that we're actually doing something about it. So and other than that, it's been the normal business of the city, which has kept me pretty occupied these last few days. I'm sure that there might be some discussion later in today of what's recently happened that's been occupying us. But for me, that's right now. I just want to talk about UBCM.
And you didn't go, Councillor Powell, so
I didn't go, but I do have something to report.
you go right ahead.
Thank you. I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting last week, and they were very grateful for the money that the city gave them to run that parade, and they wanted to express their gratitude, and they said Canada Day was a huge success. And I think that was pretty apparent by the number of the people that showed up and the participants. So thank you, the Chamber of Commerce.
I'd like to report very, very briefly that we met with 2 ministers. We asked to meet with 5. Was it 5? And we got to meet with 2. The others were busy, and I can understand for those that were suffering through the forest fires this past summer. We met with the Minister of Health. I'm glad to report that nurse practitioners now are going to be placed on salary, and that the provincial government's going to be hiring 200 nurse practitioners over the next little while. We also met with the Minister of Tourism with regards to the municipal initiative for tourism, and that item is going to Cabinet in February of next year, and there'll be a decision made at that time as to whether or not the City of Parksville is going to be included. And they have all the briefing notes and all the information. We couldn't provide them with more information if we tried. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Mayor's Caucus, and I don't want to repeat what Councillor Oates has said because he's covered it fairly thoroughly. But I went to the Mayor's Caucus meeting. I went to a number of others, but I want to dwell on safe communities, and we're going to be talking about that on Monday night with regards to cannabis. You'll note that the Canadian military now have set out rules and regulations with regards to what the military staff, when they can take cannabis and when they can't, depending on what their rules are. In our case, it's not going to be that specific, so it's going to be important that those of you who can come on Monday night, next Monday night, show up, because it's going to be interesting. And a lot of communities have different problems with regards to cannabis, and they have different arguments with regards to what the provincial government is doing or not doing. So it's going to be a real challenge. I piped up and said that I didn't think that we'd be selling cannabis until probably January. I think it's premature to assume, and we'll talk about it more Monday night, that on October the 18th or on October 17th we'll be selling cannabis in Parksville for recreational purposes and what have you. With regards to 2 other items, the social media and democracy, I attended a session on that, and it's becoming very, very obvious when you hear about certain people no longer on Facebook. The comment that was made about social media and democracy is that the social media, the shift has gone from readers to publishers. And that's become very interesting, and it's uncontrollable. It's like the Wild West. And it has an impact on democracy, and we've seen a little bit of that here. So there's no answer right away, but there's something that'll be talked about, I believe, more and more as the months go by. The other thing, when we talk about, in the Mayor's Caucus, we did a great deal of discussion with Minister Darcy, who's responsible, I believe, for mental health and what have you. And she said a number of things, and I'm just going to give you a one-line bullets. There's no quick fix. We have to be in it for the long haul. There's a lot of pathways to get there. The big problem is stigmatization. It creates aloneness and shame. And addiction is now considered a health issue, not a moral issue. So this whole area is not going to go away. We have it in our community, and we have people that are around and about and looking for some sort of shelter. So that's the short version of it. There's a lot of support, and what I found very, very interesting about this whole issue of addiction is that there's no longer one path to resolving addiction. There's a number of paths, and some people need different things, and the provincial government is committed to providing that. There's no longer saying you go to door A or you go to door B, but those are the only options you have. Those options are going to change radically over the months, and that's very good to hear, because there's no one pathway to resolving these challenges that people have. And lastly, I want to say that sort of to echo a little bit what Councillor Oates had said, when I talked to different mayors, especially when I was in the Mayor's Caucus, and there was 50, 60, 70 mayors in that caucus, some people have a worse problem, some people have a less problem, some people have the same problem. And it's on everybody's mind, it's on everybody's agenda to deal with this. And in the future, this is going to have to be dealt with. And I think the big issue that's coming up, and the provincial government are prepared to step up to the plate, is affordable housing. And that's something that I would encourage the next council, the next mayor and council, to work very hard towards, because that is the #1 issue that's going on right now. Never mind the poorest of the poor. There's people that are working but still have a hard time and are struggling through making all of their needs met. There were some statistics, for example, that some people on the Lower Mainland are spending 80% of their income just on housing. Sometimes it's as low as 67%, but nevertheless, be that as it may, in some areas it's simply atrocious. And the government's aware of it, and they're going to get ready to do something about it. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Beale, who was also at the UBCM.
Thank you very much. And yes, no surprise. I also want to speak about the UBCM and my experiences there. It was a very intense week, I will tell you that. Sessions starting as early as 7:30 in the morning and going to 4:30 or later. I figured out it's got to be at least 50, 60 plus hours of being on. I attended sessions on housing affordability and programs, and I learned also learn more about policing in British Columbia. I was able to gain insights into partnerships on mental health and addictions, and I learned about community safety officers, which are used in some communities. There was a town hall type panel on safe communities, which was an amazing opportunity to hear from and question the people who were there. It was really fantastic, because we're talking about, actual ministers, or in this case, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and another minister on matters of public safety. So to hear from these folks as to what their priorities are and what they're working on with their staff was really great. And they were very much listening to us, being all of us in the room, and taking notes about ideas that they had not thought of. I learned and asked questions about so-called drug courts, which was an interesting one, so that you don't get that revolving wheel of someone who may have addictions, has committed some petty crimes, or even prolific, going into the court system, doing whatever has to happen, and then they're back out again, and problems haven't really been solved, and so it just goes on and on. But some areas have something called drug courts, which involve treatment options as part of conditions, and the only thing there is that you really do have to have those supports in place in communities in order to use them. So they are quite successful where they have been used, and there have been other pilot projects for action outreach teams and so on. And the people in the panel were very interested in pursuing these, as were those who were at the policing forum as well, which had a lot of information about specific projects that are being tried in various communities, such as Powell River, Prince George, and elsewhere. As both Councillor Oates and our mayor mentioned, what we face in our town is being faced all over the province, although it does look a little different in some places. Hearing councillors speak from Grand Forks, I thought it could have been Parksville, identical. So what we have here is it's being experienced all over, and the challenges with housing, of course, only add to the situation for many of our residents. Housing access and affordability was a very strong and consistent theme, and it was the focus with the mid-sized communities. Also, I wanted to mention that Minister Robinson, who was mentioned earlier, announced the launch of funding programs for community infrastructure. So that was a little bit aside from the housing situations. And that certainly got loud applause, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this. And I would also be remiss if I did not mention the many hours spent on debating and voting on resolutions that were brought forth. And finally, actually, one other thing, mentioning statistics. From the statistics that were shared, approximately 25 or 26% of people living in Parksville are renters, and of those, about 30% are paying 51% or more of their income on housing, on accommodation, on shelter. And generally speaking, one should be spending only about 30%. So we've got a tough situation here, and of course the Vancouver examples are just out of this world. But finally, I will finish. It's good to be back home on the island. That's all I'd like to say.
Councillor Salter, do you want me to tell everybody the night we met?
I don't want to hear about that. I actually got lost, and I was so lost. I was so lost in Whistler that I desperately ran into a grocery store, and my heart was beating. I was going to end up sleeping in my car. And of all people, there's the mayor and his wife shopping, thank God. So I offered them a ride back to the hotel, and actually had a bed that night. So it was quite hilarious. It doesn't take much to get lost when I'm driving. So yes, regarding UBC, I won't repeat what everyone else has already discussed. I did attend, also attended many of the forums that were offered. One was on cannabis, and we did get a lot of information on that. Some actually new information, which I know we're going to discuss later, but they were talking about managing and regulating things like edibles, developing like a full framework, like a rural framework. They're continuing to meet beyond the date of legalization, which is the 17th, but it's going to be a work in progress still. So really interesting discussion there on cannabis and how it's moving along forward. They're talking about impairment, like how to determine whether or not someone's impaired or not, the way we do with alcohol. So I'm glad that they're actually working on that. And also they discussed leases. That they said apparently current leases would remain in place, and then after the 17th, that would be renegotiated between the landlord and the business owner. So it's going to be an interesting, very interesting next few months, I think. And then another one that I really enjoyed was. It was called To Tick the Box or Not, something like that. And it was about Aboriginal folks and the whole issue around reconciliation. And these were a band out of, they were down in Langford. And they talked about how they were negotiating property that was bordering another area. I think it was Saanich, it was Langford and another area. And it sounded insurmountable. When they first discussed it, it sounded insurmountable because this property was in the middle. They were given this piece of property, the band were in the middle of these two communities. And it was really, it had no value to them in the middle of these two communities. But they talked about how they went about making that change, and they used the way they used the traditional way that you do with Aboriginals, which was knocking on people's doors and personally inviting them to come to meetings. So people felt engaged in that rather than how sort of the European way would just send a letter and invite you, and you come or you don't come, and that's that. But so people showed up, and people sat together, and as a community, and as council, and they actually discussed how are we going to make this work. And they made it work so well. It was incredible. They changed boundaries. The First Nations got this awesome piece of property, which is in parkland in perpetuity. It's right on the water. The other boundaries were changed. It's just the whole way there was so much respect there. It was, wished I could have been part of it. It was just really, really a nice thing to hear. And when they spoke about reconciliation, they said this is the action. Because there's so much discussion, there's so much talk, there's so much paperwork, so many things that are signed, but really there's no movement towards reconciliation except the words. But there, they said it was so, they actually were, it was in play there. And you could see the result, which was just, I thought it was just fantastic. Also the subsidized housing, or the housing which, yeah, subsidized housing is coming. I'm looking forward to that. And there's many reasons for that, not the least of which is subsidized housing has the least amount of stigma with it, because anyone can live there, but it's subsidized. So that speaks so much to folks who can't afford their rent, whose rents are so expensive that they're paying rent, they're not eating food. When it's subsidized, they're managing well, and they're actually moving forward, regardless of who you are, regardless of how you live your life. There's no stigma there, and I'm really, really hoping that this community will have subsidized housing sooner than later. And I do believe that our community would like to see that as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that was UBCM. Although that's what everyone's talking about, I do have one other thing that I do want to talk about under new business, and that's Wren's Road. I've had several phone calls from folks who are living on Wren's Road. They're in the Newers area that's being built up now. And I actually went down there, and many of them, they're nice places, but they're sort of up on a little bit, like you go up into their driveways. And there's a bike lane right in front of these houses. And they've got these tiny little driveways. So what they're saying is we can't even get our cars. Like, we can get one car up here. We have two cars. We can't park them here. When we have company, there's nowhere for them to park. One lady had some baby shower going on, and there was nowhere for her friends to park because there was a bike lane right in front of their house, and they have this tiny little driveway. So they've asked that I bring it forward, which I will do. It's going to come forward again after the next election. They're going to be coming in to make a presentation to council because basically on the other side of the road there's nothing. There are no buildings over there. There's no houses. Maybe we could think about moving that bike lane to the other side of the road so that folks could have a place to park in front of their own homes. So I just wanted to bring that forward. I promised I would. So that's it. Thank you.
Mrs. Comas, can staff look at that before it gets too bad?
I would appreciate that, and I'm sure they would too.
Okay, thank you. Sorry that we saved the best for the last.
I'm not sorry at all. All of the preceding comments apply, with the exception, I guess I was the only one that attended the workshop on the financial end and the administrative end of policing in British Columbia, which is a real eye-opener for me. We have I know that in the budget last year we put an additional officer in, and I know that they have some positions that they've been trying to backfill, and now I'm a little bit more aware of the struggles that the RCMP are having in terms of actually filling those positions, despite the fact that we're trying to be as proactive as possible in doing that. So know anybody of RCMP age and the physical characteristics that are required, etc., to get their application in. I think they'll probably be at depot in no time, although they also said that they were struggling to hold enough training sessions at depot. I think they had a contingent of 40 at a time, and so what I'm saying is that despite the fact that we want more RCMP presence in our community, I don't think it's going to be coming as quickly as we would like it. And I guess the other piece was with regard to that wasn't mentioned, was with regard to the cannabis legislation and legalization. There was a resolution passed that will go forward to government with regard to the sharing of the taxation revenue with municipalities, because we are going to be bearing some of the the administrative load and some of the expenses involved in looking at how we're going to manage the sale of recreational cannabis in our community, and so hopefully the provincial government will compensate us appropriately. One other quick comment. I attended the session on housing in Parksville here, organized by our MP Gord Johns last week. Last week covers it. It was well attended. It was great information. The folks from BC Housing were there. The folks from the BC Nonprofit Housing Association were there, and there was a local developer, Dan Dugan, who's been working on some affordable housing issues. And information was good. Participation was good. And again, I think it's something that we absolutely have to make a #1 priority in our community going forward.
Councillor Burton, was there any interest expressed in retirees joining the RCMP who like to carry guns? No? Oh, okay. Oh. There goes my carrying a gun. Thank you very much, Council. Yes, Councillor Oates?
Yes, just following up on what Councillor Burton said about the inability perhaps to obtain staff, one of the other things that we learned at UBCM was that the city council, the municipality, could have more of a say in how any additional officers are used. Now, I've been under the understanding that any additional officers that we're getting in here in Parksville are going to be dedicated towards traffic. When we mentioned that to the folks at UBCM, Mike Farnsworth, the Solicitor General, said, if you as a municipality wish to change that priority, you have the ability to do that. So if we're going to have trouble getting another officer, I would suggest that when that officer comes, we align the priorities of council with the duties of that officer. And I'm not sure right now that I personally don't think traffic is a priority. I think there's other things that we could use a police officer for, and I'd like to have that discussion and reconcile the difference between what the police told us both here and at the RDN versus what the Solicitor General told us at UBCM.
Thank you for that. Okay, good point. All right, we're moving on. We have 3 delegations tonight, Council. The first delegation is the Parksville Downtown Business Association, represented by Board Member Mr. Arthur Wong and PDBA Executive Director Pamela Bottomley. Please come to the microphone. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen of the City and Council. So my name is Arthur Wong. I'm here representing the Parksville Downtown Business Association. Just wanted to give you some background. For the past 11 years, Parksville Downtown Business Association has come in front of Council 3 times, representing the property owners of our downtown core. They've chosen to pool their resources through a levy which is assessed on commercially assessed properties to make downtown a better place. So, and once again, that's through the vehicle of the Parksville Downtown Business Association. Since the BIA, or Business Improvement Area, which from the west, which is Macmillan, to the east, McVickers, south, which is Jensen, and to the waterfront, was first designated, there have been enormous changes, renewed energy, and more activity downtown. New businesses, buildings, and facade improvements, and PDBA, which administers the BIA, has also evolved. So we have 5 pillars in our strategic plan, which are to strengthen relationships with our key stakeholders, enhance value for property owners, be the marketing agent for Parksville Downtown, galvanize our membership, and be the champion of downtown revitalization. Parksville Downtown Business Improvement Area was first established in 2007 by way of petition process, which was renewed in 2009, and in 2014 was renewed for a 3rd time by council initiative. Bylaw 1502, which enables the business improvement area to exist and the levy to be collected, expires at the end of next year, end of 2019. We respectfully request that the renewal for the BIA required in 2019 be conducted as a council initiative, again, similar to 2014, as allowed by the community charter. Once we have confirmation from the city of our renewal process, our next steps will include development of a comprehensive communication program to inform our members of the process and requirements. Thank you for your consideration, and would like to take any questions or comments.
Thanks very much. This has been done before. Any questions from members of council? Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I would like to congratulate you. I know that we've got the new direction signs up, the wayfinding signs, pardon me, and I think that it's all coming together. I was driving down there this afternoon, and the light colored green signs, like, I think you've done a great job. And I was there at the beginning. I remember this when it first rolled out. It seemed like we'd never get here. And I would like to congratulate you on getting here, because I know it's been a slog. And I would also like to put forward a motion that staff be directed to initiate the approval process required for the proposed renewal of the downtown business improvement area for the period 2020 to 2025.
And keep it up. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. The next delegation is the Parksville Beach Festival Society. Proposed performance stage in the community park. Presentation by Cheryl Dill, President of the Parksville Beach Festival Society, and Lloyd Derry of plans and details related to the proposed performance stage in the community park. Welcome. And you're still not telling us how much you made this summer at Beach Fest. It's a secret. It's the best kept secret in town. Can we guess? No?
Good evening, Your Worship, Council, staff, and audience members. I'm Cheryl Dill. I'm the President of Parksville Beach Festival Society. Thank you very much for having us here. And I'd like to introduce Lloyd Derry, who is Director on our board and also in charge of entertainment for Parksville Beach Festival. Tonight, I'm very pleased to come here and share a little bit of a presentation. And so we'll do my best to be short and sweet, and along with Lloyd. I just wanted to mention that we've got some directors here from Parksville Beach Festival Society with us tonight, and also Gary Bentham, and I'm very grateful for their support here. So let's continue here. Let's see what we have. So just a little bit of an overview about Parksville Beach Festival Society. Many of you know, in the room here, know what we're about, but just as a reminder that we are a not-for-profit society, and our mandate is to organize fun, family-oriented events alongside Parksville Community Park's beautiful beach. That's a lot of fun, and we enjoy doing that. One of the things that we ensure about our events is that we can celebrate artistry, whether that's in the sand, whether that's through art in the park or our entertainment. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we can promote community involvement. And I think many of you can take that in from summer to summer. You can come down and see the sand sculptures and participate in different ways. We're going to tell you about that. We also help other groups in this community, not-for-profit groups, philanthropic groups. We help them raise funds. That's very important to us. And just coming up in October, we're going to give some money away once again. This is one of the things that you know us for. You know us for what we do well, and that is the sand sculptures in the Parksville Community Park. It's an international event. We invite sculptors from all over the world, and they make incredible artwork out of the sand and water. And we draw thousands of people every year to this community. And this year, in 2018, we drew close to 126,000 people to this site to witness this artistry and celebrate the natural surroundings that we have. We are very pleased to report that we had at least 150 volunteers staffing the gate and welcoming people into our community. Many of the people who do come to see what's happening at the beach in the sand are residents, and we're really happy to provide an engaging opportunity over a 5-week period to make that happen. And I know that many of you are interested in how much money we're donating this year. And if you come on October 17th, you'll find that out. But now, October 17th, yes, 1 o'clock in this room. Ah, dear. Now, one of the other things that we enjoy doing is, and I've seen many of you there in this crowd, you might be able to find yourselves in there, is that we entertain, we organize entertainment in the park, and we use the wonderful picnic shelter, the versatile picnic shelter that has been a venue for entertainment in the park for a long time. And we're very grateful to be able to use that space at very, very little cost, of course. And so we're so grateful to the city for that. But alas, even though you can see people enjoying themselves in the park and even dancing up there in the right-hand or left-hand corner, and I can say that in some of the venues or the organization, some of the actual performances this year, we saw probably 1,200 at least just gathering around that picnic site. And some of the groups drew smaller crowds, like 300. But bottom line, it's a growing event in terms of the number of people coming out. We really enjoy featuring local talent in this community and beyond, on Vancouver Island or close by. And we know that there are so many people who would love to continue doing this work and entertaining the public. So the challenge, though, is that the picnic shelter is not ideal for performances, and it limits what we can do in terms of artistry in our community. So for a long time, the Parksville Beach Festival Society has been talking about what can we do to increase the arts and culture in this community. We recognize that we don't have an appropriate outdoor theater for the performing arts, and so we've been talking for a long time now about how we can make that happen, and I know there are others before me on that board who have been doing the same. So because we've been so successful with our mainstay event, we've been putting a little bit of money aside. And so what we want is we're aiming to design, construct, and fund a structure for the performing arts in the community park. We envision that small, large musical groups, dance troupes, you name it, can be in the park performing. So little kids Highland dancing to Vancouver Island Symphony, and we have consulted with both. We would like to gift the structure to the city of Parksville to operate, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But just to make sure you're clear on why we're here tonight, because I know many of you have heard us talk about this before. When we came about a year ago, November 2017, at that time the Community Park Master Plan was being put together in terms of a final report, and we participated in some of that community consultation. It was great, but we felt that our voices were underrepresented, and part of that is because of us. We weren't really clear as to what it was that we needed to say about this stage. And so then what we did is we had several meetings with city representatives. We recognized that the Community Park Master Plan, when it was presented in November, December, that it was missing the priority that we talked about. And I think that's because we weren't as clear as we needed to be. And what we needed to do is come up with some tangible design concepts to help move the idea and the discussion forward and establish a budget that's where we're grateful for working with Gary on helping us to come up with that. And we also realized after speaking with city staff and council that we needed more public input. And so that's what we've been focusing on. And tonight, that's really what we're here to do, is we want to present the results of the public engagement over the past couple months that we've taken time to do while running a major event in this community. So we're also here to ask for council's support. So I'm just going to turn the microphone over to Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and just want to echo Cheryl's comments to the Mayor and Council, the Community Park Master Plan Committee, and the staff for all their guidance and help to get us to this stage. So, as Cheryl said, our Beach Festival Society has long had a vision to construct an outdoor theater for the performing arts, not only to complement our uses, but also those of the cultural and arts communities within the Oceanside area. Our society has set aside funds for a number of years towards this capital project. And as Cheryl mentioned, the design will accommodate a wide range of uses. And we think it would be a wonderful addition to the park, which is already, I know we feel, and I think many others feel, that the park is the crown jewel of this community. So we really want to add to that. So the stage itself will measure, I have a laser. Oh, by the way, when Cheryl said I was entertainment director, I'm hoping you didn't expect like a song and dance, because I didn't prepare anything, so darn it. So the stage itself across here will be will be 50 feet across. It's about approximately 36 feet deep. It'll include 2 dressing rooms, complete with accessible washrooms, and we're designing the acoustics so that they will accommodate both acoustic and also sound reinforced performances. Okay, Cheryl. So this is a site plan. This is where we would like to put it, right in that corner. So the highway is right here. Of course, the ball diamond's here. Picnic shelter right here, and as you all know, the crowds gather in here. This particular location opens up a wide area for the viewing public. This slide is simply a slide that shows, and I know it's hard to see, folks, it shows the location of various utilities. I think the only things we'd like to point out here is, obviously, we'd need a bit of an access road in, so that is designed here. And we would also put in we'd want to put in an underground wiring for sound about 75 feet out in front. So it would be located out here where you could throw a tent in on the nights of performances, and the sound technicians could sit out there. This is just a side view, and a good time to also thank and recognize Gary Bentham from Village Design and Drafting. Gary has just worked in concert with us. He's worked tirelessly on this, so and he's here tonight, and we're very thankful for his contribution. As the performance area was not originally identified as a short-term priority in the draft Community Parks Master Plan, our board decided to take our initiative to the public over the course of Beach Fest this past summer as a means to generally gauge public opinion, as well as specifically ask the residents of Parksville for their views on the construction of such a facility. And frankly, we did not expect the response we got from the public, both at the Sandcastle site and in the concerts. We were surprised. It was literally overwhelming. So the petition itself, and I know you're all, I'll just read the wording. So it said, we, the undersigned residents of Parksville, hereby request Parksville City Council establish the construction of an outdoor theater for the performing arts as a short-term priority in the Parksville Community Parks Master Plan. And then at the bottom of the petition, there was a note that information collected by the petition becomes public information. So Cheryl has a binder, and in that binder we have the results of the petition forms itself. So not only did we collect 1,300, in excess of 1,300, I believe 1,340 signatures from the voting residents, but we received the support from a diverse range of area community organizations, arts and cultural groups, and individuals from the Oceanside area and beyond. Just to illustrate that, one gentleman from Washington came up at one of the concerts and wanted to make a donation right that night. A local resident, Peter Lozon, offered to construct a model of the stage, which he's working on. Peter's here tonight, and it will be, should we gain approval, that model will be an important component as when we launch a fundraising campaign. We received an encouraging letter of support from the Park Sands right next door. They're fully supportive of the outdoor theater. We had a professional engineer that has supervised many construction, many major undertakings across Canada and the United States approach us and volunteer to oversee the construction. So the general consensus was a facility like this was long overdue and much needed in our community. To my knowledge, I can honestly say that right through that whole public consultation period, both at the sand sculpture site and at the concerts, we did not receive one dissenting viewpoint. Also, our Beach Fest board would give consideration, if this is built, towards contributing annually towards the operation and maintenance of this facility, as well as actively seek other sources of annual funding for this purpose. And so we're here for the long run, folks.
Thank you, Lloyd. So just in closing, we'd like to begin our campaign to raise funds, and we've got at this point, we estimated a short-term 3-year kind of fundraising and construction plan. So in order to make that happen, we recognize that we need your support. We're very grateful that the committee's been looking at recommendations for the Community Park Master Plan, and that we see that it's in there in the recommendations, that this actual wording of the outdoor theater for the performing arts is there, so we're grateful for that. We recognize the necessity and the value of collaborating with city staff. We're happy to be doing that. That's what we've been doing so far, and which is why it was a valuable process to gather some public input. And we also recognize that the recommendation is tied to the drainage issues in the park, and that has to work in line with the construction timeline. So what we're doing is we're wanting to ask for your support tonight to approve that recommendation that comes forward from your committee to look at the Community Park Master Plan, so that we can get going. And then finally, my last comment, folks. Over the course of the last several months, our community has faced a great diversity of perspectives, which has brought a number of special challenges to this community. Looking, and personally sitting there every night at these concerts and looking over the smiling faces and happy faces of what we think was approximately 6,000 people at the concerts drew, that the 10 concerts drew, I couldn't help but think of how music is a universal language that unites everyone, makes us forget our differences, even if only for a short while, and has a unique healing power. We need more of this, and with your support, the Beach Festival Society will be able to leave this lasting legacy of this wonderful theater to our community. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've obviously done a lot of hard work to bring it to this point. Members of council, questions for the delegation? Councillor Beal?
Thank you very much. I actually don't have many questions, but I'd just like to explain that I don't, because as I have been sitting on the Community Parks Master Plan Committee, I've had the opportunity to see the work that you brought forward and to go through it in some detail. And in addition to that, I was one of the volunteers down at Beach Fest. And so again, got to see the responses of people who were looking at the information and looking at the petition. So I do want to thank you for the great work that you've put into the presentation.
Any other members of council with questions? Councillor Burton, I have some questions.
Not so much a question. I'm reminded of the 3 weeks of insanity that I spent with my friend Bill McKinney in, I think, 2003 or 4, putting on 7 nights of concerts per week, taking the equipment away. We didn't take the stage down, but we took the equipment away every night and set it back up again. And I think that this is certainly a solution to allowing folks to do those kinds of events without the exhaustion that ensues.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I've had the pleasure of being in a community that didn't have a stage, and they did exactly what the Beach Fest is doing, and I have to tell you, it has been so successful, and it has brought the community together. It's the city of Parksville, and they have a beautiful Laborde Park, and it's like a perfect sound system, and we had kids up there with air band contests. It was amazing, and the whole community would come out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so I really look forward to seeing this in our community, because I think it's a good idea.
You have a go ahead, Councillor Salter. No, you go ahead. I can wait.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is a good idea. I think it would be great to have a sound stage down there. I think there's a lot sort of hinging on this stage, though. One is the sound itself. Is it going to be blasted off? We've had complaints about noise down at the beach. So is it going to be? Are the acoustics going to sort of go off into the into the water, sort of away from that area, which would be, I think, great. Or I know that at the Butch Art Gardens, they've got a really good setup down there. It doesn't sort of move out into the community. However they've built it, it goes just directly to the folks who are engaged in whatever is going on stage, the music or the plays. So I don't not agree with it. But that would be certainly important to me, because I know it's happened over the years. And I think the other piece is we're kind of at the end of our term now, and I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel doing this now, knowing I'm not going to be sitting at this table in just a couple weeks. There is a new council coming in who, because I think there's a lot of work to be done here. I think there's a lot of we're going to need reports, so we're going to need to know, the exact locations and all of those things, how it's going to be built and so on. I think there's going to be should be a lot of engagement with council and you to get this off the ground. And I know that many of us won't be here to do that. So I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable making that decision just because of that, because we're so close to the end of our terms now.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. If I could just respond to that, a couple of points I'd like to bring up, and I did forget when we did show the site plan, we purposely pointed the stage towards the ocean so that it would minimize any sound bleed, and there are things you can do in the design to also control what comes out the side. So that was very strategic on our part to point it that way. With regard to your comment about this council approving it or not, my only comment would be we're fully aware that the next council could rescind that. What an approval at this point, or your blessing at this point, would do for us would allow us to begin to develop our fundraising campaign. It'll take, obviously, some time to develop that, and I think it would be inappropriate of us to start that without the blessing of council. So that would be my comments to your queries. I don't know if Cheryl's got anything further.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, so with the signatures that you did get, over 1,000, do you know how many were local folks, approximately?
All of them were. We actually had people from the states and every province in Canada that didn't necessarily read the petition and they signed it. So when we tabulated the results, we just, and it's on the bottom of every sheet, every petition sheet, we just counted the residents that signed it. So 1,340 residents of Parksville signed it.
Councillor Burden.
This has come about we're going to be looking at the Community Park Master Plan report at item 6, I think. Councillor Beal, Councillor Powell, and myself with staff, have been on the Community Park Master Plan Implementation Committee. We've been working through the process since, I think, the spring, early summer. This is the culmination of a significant amount of work from staff and this council to get us to this point where the performance stage is being included in the priorities going forward. We're not making motions to approve construction at this stage, but we're certainly looking to bring the concept forward into the short-term priorities.
Councillor Oates.
Okay, thank you, Worship. So the Beach Fest group have come here tonight looking for support from our council, and I know that the item that you just, Councillor Burden just referenced, is coming up under item 6D, I believe it is. Is that 6D? If that is passed in the affirmative at that point, does that give the the nod of support to Beach Fest that they require?
Mrs. Comas, you want to tackle that?
Well, because the motion that I see there is one that it be received. Is there going to be and by receiving that motion on page 86 of 134, the report that we'll be dealing at that time, it says that they will ask, September 15th, Beach Fest will ask Council to approve the construction of an outdoor theater as a short-term priority in the Community Park Master Plan. If the motion to receive the report is in the affirmative, does that mean we've then approved it and given these folks the assurances that they need, or do we need another motion? And I'm prepared to work till the end of my shift. It seems like lots of people like to quit halfway through.
Your Worship, the motion to receive is simply that, to receive the report, but I understand there is another motion coming forward. The proposal by Beach Fest in the Community Park Master Plan report is to make it a short-term priority. So therefore, the request and the recommendation of the committee are in sync.
Okay. I have a few questions about money. How much money are you planning on raising with this funding campaign? Is it based on the fact that what you think what this would cost?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We plan to raise it all. And at this point, we're still not quite at the point where we have a final construction cost. We think it'll be in the neighborhood of $750,000 or something to that effect. We have a portion, as I said, already saved. By accessing provincial and federal grants, we think we can, between that and what we already have, that we can raise the rest in the community and from philanthropists in this area. So our plan is to raise the total amount for the capital cost.
And you've confirmed what those costs are going to be? Have you confirmed those with, I'm talking about the capital costs.
Not exactly, but we're in the ballpark around $750,000 to $850,000.
Would it not be a good idea to sort of nail down what the capital cost would be?
Absolutely.
Before you start the fundraising?
Absolutely, and we'll know that within probably the next few weeks or a month. Yeah. What we would like to do is start to develop, start to develop what that fundraising campaign will look like, and establish various levels of sponsorship and those type of things. So we just wanted to start to work on that. We would absolutely not start fundraising until we knew the total capital construction cost.
Okay. And then the other foot that falls is the ongoing O&M cost, and that would be the responsibility of the city?
As I said earlier, we would plan to take it to our board to contribute to that annually, as well as I think we can come up with some innovative ways in the community to help with that on a yearly basis.
So members of council, do we want to wait until we get to that other motion where we're going to be approving the project? Okay. So, you get 2 for 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I'm really disappointed that we didn't get to know how much money. I'll live with it.
Thank you.
Okay, the last delegation we have this evening is the Mid-Island Estuaries, the Canada Goose Management Update, Mr. Cooper and Mr. Clermont. And I want to tell you that when I write my memoirs, this is going to be one of the most interesting chapters in the book, my mayoral memoirs, because I had quite a time. Anyway, that's for my memoirs. I'm not going to give it away. So go ahead and welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Lefebvre and Council, for inviting the Guardians of Mid-Island Estuary Society to give a presentation to you tonight. I'm John Cooper. I'm the president of the Guardians, and I have with me Tim Clermont, who is our executive director. And our purpose of coming tonight is to give you an update on our activities and results that we experienced this year, following up on the presentation I did last year for 2017. So we have a number of programs that we're involved in. We conduct our egg addling programs in different estuaries in Oceanside and elsewhere. We have started harvesting Canada geese to reduce populations directly, and we're also heavily involved in estuary restoration through planting of carrick sedge plants and building exclosures and trying to get some of the damaged and degraded estuary environment back to a more functioning level. So this year we carried on with our egg addling program. We addle goose nests in the Englishman Estuary, Little Qualicum Estuary, Nanoose Bay Estuaries, and a variety of farmlands within the Oceanside area. Results were similar to last year. We found, especially in the Englishman, we were able to reduce the nesting population a couple of years ago through our harvest of birds in the Englishman. And we're down to about 1/3 of the number of birds nesting in the Englishman this year, as well as last year, as we had in the previous 3 to 5 years. And that has led to direct benefit for environmental reasons in the estuary itself, and also has certainly reduced some of the nuisance problems created by geese in our city parks and other lands. So that's been a long-term project that we've been doing for a number of years and will need to continue to do in the future. Some of our more direct action, you may recall that we carried out a harvest of geese in the Englishman Estuary in 2016. And in 2017, we did the same in the Little Qualicum Estuary and up in the Campbell River Estuary. And the harvest program has worked out very well in many respects, and probably one of the more important parts of the program is that we forged very strong relationships with a number of First Nations on Vancouver Island, including the Comox First Nation, the Wewakam and Campbell River, and more recently, and I'll get to that in a minute, but with the Nanoose First Nation here in Oceanside, and also down in Saanich with the Sawut First Nation. And we've sort of helped introduce First Nations into consuming Canada geese as traditional food. It's a food source that they were not using previously because historically there weren't a lot of Canada geese on eastern Vancouver Island. And through our efforts, mainly with Tim and the Comox First Nations, we've introduced several other groups to utilizing Canada geese as food, and it's worked out really, really well. So this year, we held 3 harvest programs. One was in the Nanu's Parksville area. We were able to employ 7 members of the Nanu's First Nations who really enjoyed having some employment, and then this was their first experience with using Canada geese as food. They were very, very involved. Most of the band was very, very interested in what was going on, and they were very excited about this new source of food and look forward to carrying on in the future. And we really feel that we've been able to help build a relationship, you know, in some small way between the City of Parksville and the Nanu's First Nation through our work with them. We also received some interest from outside of Oceanside, and we were approached by other governments, and we went down to Saanich and conducted a harvest down there, and did the same thing with that First Nation. I introduced them to capturing geese and using them as food. Tim and the Comox First Nations fellows, especially Corey Franks, held a sort of a cooking workshop and invited members of the band down there to come out, and they cooked up a big spaghetti and meatballs dinner, and then the community was invited to come in. People came in and enjoyed Goose, and they're very, very excited. They're out there catching fish and crabs and digging clams, and now they're harvesting geese as well. So they really, really enjoyed that. And our final harvest program was up in Campbell River, where we went up and helped the Wewicum harvest more geese this year. So this year in total, we had at least 20 First Nations persons working with us and for us. And it's working out very, very well. And we think that this will be part of the long-term solution to our goose issues, is to have the various local First Nations take a lead role in managing numbers. The other component of our program is the restoration work that we started. Because of the reduction in goose numbers that we saw in the Englishman and Little Qualicum in the last couple of years through our harvest program, and also with the Adling program, we noticed we were able to transplant some carracks into plots, and we noticed that there was some really good regrowth of some of the beds of carracks that we planted, and also some natural expansion of existing beds into areas because of the reduced grazing pressure from Canada geese. So we have seen, I reported last year that we saw immediate results from the 2016 harvest in 2017 with the improved estuary condition, and that trend has continued this year. We have used rebar and fencing material to create the plots, the exclosures to keep geese out of some of our sites. And Tim Clermont and the Comox First Nations are now starting to use a new technique. It's a eco-cultural restoration technique where they are substituting willow and alder poles and weaving them together in ways to act as fencing, and that will replace the plastic fencing and rebar that we've used in the past. And this holds really great promise, I think, for a more natural kind of restoration work in the future. This is a pioneering effort by Tim and the Comox First Nations on Vancouver Island. So first projects were done this year up in Comox, and there seems to be some really good results so far.
We're cutting Home Depot out, and hopefully we can use some of the hemp to use the wrap around.
Tim, do you want to use the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're just, in this way, we're going to cut Home Depot out of the plastic and the rebar business.
We're also going to help Ministry of Highways help reduce the amount of alder and willows on some of the right-of-ways, because we have a permit to harvest the trees from the highway right-of-ways. As you are aware, we've had a 3-year agreement with the City of Parksville to help fund some of the management efforts on Canada Geese, and that's coming to an end this year. Next year, we hope that the new council will look favorably on continuing support of some of our work, especially furthering some of the efforts of the Goose management strategy that the community has supported for a number of years now. We're writing funding proposals for much larger sums of money than we've had in the past, as we've had terrific interest from other governments on Vancouver Island, both at local level and higher levels. And we would also like to see hope that the new council would, or maybe the existing council would agree to have staff compose a support letter for our funding applications. We anticipate that we'll be expanding our efforts throughout Vancouver Island with increased funding. And this, you may recall last year I mentioned that we do need to expand our efforts throughout the island and elsewhere to help put a lid on the continued growth of Canada Goose populations. I'd just like to say that we thank you very much for your unwavering support for the last number of years, and we really appreciate your support.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Salter, Councillor Powell, Councillor Beal, and Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. When do you think we will reach that point where Adeline will work without having to round up the geese and harvest them?
Yeah, that's the plan. We don't want to keep doing this. We want to be out of business in doing this.
Like how long do you think?
It depends on what other communities do, because you guys have showed tremendous leadership. The other communities have to step up, and so it's a bit of a wild card in that sense. But what we've demonstrated a technique that kind of works, and now it needs to be done in other areas of Vancouver Island for sure.
And I really like your idea with the fence too. That is so awesome. I'd like to make a motion that we do provide that support letter. Well, I'm making a motion for a support letter as requested.
Okay. Do you want to let Councillor Salter make that motion, or you were going to make it?
Well, I am making the motion. I just made the motion.
Okay.
That we provide a support letter.
The $35,000 a year for 28.
A letter of support.
A letter of support.
That they requested.
Okay. Have a seconder for that?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Or discussion? I guess there's no discussion. Everybody's in favor. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Salter.
And I do want to say thank you for your presentation. And I know it's making a difference. It is, I'm sure, difficult for the harvest, but knowing that part of it will hopefully end and just the Adeline will work is something to look forward to. So thank you very much.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to thank you very, very much. I've been on council since you started coming to council, and I've watched the progress that you've made through the different research that you've done and how you got to this place where we had to actually cull the geese. And I know it wasn't a decision made lightly, and especially when we heard it was costing down in Victoria area $400 and some a bird. And so we did go against the grain to do this, and I'm really, really glad that we did. I know Adeline is not the be-all to end-all, and anything that we can do to support you, I would support. Like I said, I support that letter, and I want to thank you for your research. I've been walking down in the estuary, and you can see the little plots of land, and it is starting to come back, and that, that makes me feel really good, because we've done something positive for our community. And I'm really glad that you're going to other communities as well, because I did bring this motion up to the regional district when I was the alternate, and there were people that said, well, the geese don't affect me. But actually the geese affect everybody up and down Vancouver Island. The farms, they affect the estuaries. And so I'm really appreciative of the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Worship. I too want to thank you for the great work that you've done, and also I would like to thank our staff for the incredible support that they have given to sort of move this forward. I took great pleasure and pride in hearing at the AVICC 2 years ago, I guess now, when this subject was brought forth and there was in fact a resolution passed, and there is just such increased awareness of the damage that is done, and people may think just about the geese and so on in the area, but the damage to the estuaries affects so much in the way of wildlife and our fish stock, our salmon. So, and I think we all value salmon on the island, if not in all of British Columbia. I would also like to know, well, I think the others, you have reached, are there other communities beyond Campbell River, Saanich, and any other areas that have shown interest and support at this time?
So far, it's mostly Central Saanich, the CRD in the past, the City of Campbell River, but there's groups that are kind of lobbying their local governments to get awareness in the Courtenay-Comox area. Everybody has different issues with this issue. It's all unique, and certainly the the agriculture guys are starting to kind of get more organized around this issue, and they have the ear of the minister, which is kind of what our proposal is kind of we're gonna meet with some of your staff on Thursday and talk more about how we build that. And the support from you guys is critical for that, because you've demonstrated, you've helped us along to build the science and to support us, and that'll help us get to the next level.
Okay. So I actually had another motion that I would like to make, and this is to ensure that this will have the effect of ensuring that the topic does come before council in the future. I would like to move that the 2018 to 2022 financial plan be amended to include funding in the amount of not more than $35,000 per year for 3 years in order to support the efforts of the Guardians of the Mid-Island Estuary.
Seconded by Councillor.
I'll just take the opportunity to get the information that I was hoping to get before this. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're targeting resident geese.
Yes.
And I have watched the degradation of the estuary and the rebuilding. Really also pleased to see you using willow wands and alder. They'll secure roots and continue forever. What happens when the estuary, the goal is to not be harvesting and only addling. What happens when the estuary is so full of abundantly rich goose material that the migratory birds that we see leaving over the next little while decide not to leave? Because it's just so good here.
Go ahead.
And I'm serious. I know it's a little bit.
Yeah,
animals go where the food is.
They do, and it's a complicated story why they came here in the first place. But the migratory populations are programmed to head south and north. It's possible a few of them might stick around. Maybe that it'll be a long-term management program would be required if something like that were to happen. But I really don't see the migratory birds changing their genetically programmed behavior to head south and north during migration. The birds that we have here originated from birds that were brought here and kept, and those birds did learn to stay, that's for sure. That was the root of the problem. I don't see the larger, much larger migratory populations doing that, though. But most of these estuaries are very important habitats for migratory birds, and we do want to encourage them to come, but only for a short period of time.
Okay, we're discussing the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a decision that was made early in our term, and the results are visible in our community park. You can see it down into Kitefield. You can see the difference that you've made by the actions that you've taken. I will be supporting Councillor Beale's motion that indicates this council's commitment to the program. If a future council chooses to take it out, they would have to take it out of the budget. So I'm quite excited about supporting this, and I'm pretty sure that future councils would support it too. What you've done for the community has been a service to all. Thank you.
Any further on the motion? Any further comments or questions or observations? Councillor Salter.
I have a question that I'd like to ask after we finish our vote, if that's okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should have asked before, but we do have migratory geese, though, as well, right? Not just these guys. These are the guys that are just hanging around. But
we have what people have termed resident geese. We know for that they're not all resident, but most of them are that spend the spring, the summer nesting here and then don't leave in the fall. But yes, right now, for example, the fall migration has started, and we have numbers of migratory Canada geese coming through, but they tend not to stay here very long. So they do move through. There's several subspecies that come through down the coast.
And follow up, you know the difference between them?
Between
which geese are which?
Some are identifiable based on size and color. Some are very similar.
The migratory birds don't hang out with the locals, actually. They'll be off to the corner because they have different behaviors, right? So when you study them and you look at them in the binoculars and things, you can actually see a difference. It's very subtle, but they do act a lot different. You can tell wild geese versus the locals. Yeah.
I want to thank you very much for the work that you've done along with my colleagues. I can recall back in 2003 sitting at this council table, and I believe, Mr. Clermont, you were here. Yeah. And I wanted to know at that time if the geese that we were looking at that was overwhelming our estuary, if they were edible. I never got a satisfactory answer, but I'm delighted to see that this has morphed into a sort of a movement with the First Nations, because it's great, and we know that the First Nations have been here for a long time, and they know how to cook and prepare the geese. So that's wonderful, and I'm glad to see that our estuary is being protected, because the estuary has a lot to do with fish and other species, and that's become very, very important. And lastly, I'm glad to see that on the playing fields, when I write my memoirs, I'll tell you stories about people that said, I don't go to the park anymore because I can't find a place to sit without coming home with a lot of dog poop on my blanket, or goose poop on my blankets. So it's been an interesting time. Yeah. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to add, or just to clarify, it's my understanding that the work on reducing the numbers of geese is taking place when the migratory birds have actually left. They're not around at all? Because I just wanted to, if that is correct, because people may be concerned that we're somehow eliminating the migratory birds.
You know, the harvest of geese is done during the summer nesting period, just during the period of time when the birds are flightless, during the molt period. And there are no migratory. There are some birds that do come in prior to that molt from other places, but the migratory populations are still in their normal nesting areas to the north. They don't start to arrive until sort of late August and September.
Well, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of Council, we're moving on to item 5, which is under correspondence. The Vancouver Island University has a request for sponsorship of Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association fall meeting. And first of all, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Now, should Council wish to support this wording, you go ahead. All right.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I just roughly checked the numbers. So for $1,500, we can be a silver sponsor, or gold. So we are $68.45 short. And so the question I have, who figured out the numbers for what it would cost us? And I think we should be a gold sponsor.
Councillor Burton.
If I may. I'd like to move that the City of Parksville provide an in-kind donation through the Council Contingency Fund of $1,500 to the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region for the Canadian Biosphere Reserves Association meeting being held in Parksville November 20th to 23rd, 2018. No, we got a motion on the floor. I shouldn't have done that. Sorry.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor. If we could
Oh, to receive, okay. All those in favor of receiving, that is unanimous. So
What I said.
okay, so what he said on this, I've got a mover and a seconder. Any questions?
Why 1,500 instead of the requested 1431.55?
Councillor Burton.
So we can get the profile that comes with a gold sponsorship. There's a lot of advertising recognition that the City of Parksville will receive. 2 other UNESCO biosphere reserves within Canada.
But
$60, come on.
okay, and so we do this at a council contingency. We still got $9,400 left there, so there's lots of room.
Councillor Beal wants to say something.
Yes, the way I see it is that, we might be providing an extra urn of coffee or something like that. They could decide.
Okay. No further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, Council, we're moving on to reports. And the first report is the consideration of an exemptions to the minimum 10% frontage requirement applicable to a subdivision on 180 Jensen Avenue. At this time, I'd like to advise Council that this item should be removed from the agenda as the proponent has withdrawn their application for subdivision for reasons detailed in a letter that I'd like to read tonight. Mayor and Council, please be advised that Berwick Retirement Communities Limited, on behalf of Rivera Incorporated, the landowner, hereby withdraw the subject subdivision application as all work and activity on the development permit for the Berwick Parksville Retirement Complex at 180 Jensen has been stopped pending resolution of the legal challenge to the rezoning of 222 Corfield. The Mayor and Administrator have been informed that this would likely take place at a meeting on June 18th at City Hall with Chris and Gordon Denford of Berwick Retirement Communities Limited prior to the public hearing of June the 19th. Work has continued on previously committed work site and the permit application in the hope that the Mayor and Council would recognize that the intended land use of 222 Corfield would be totally incompatible with that of our seniors' residence, the home of 250 seniors, which includes the daycare center for children of those of our 150 employees who need it. On Thursday, September 13th, Bill Baumhoff, Berwick Project and Construction Manager, informed the building inspector that we will not accept the approved building permit or pay the City of Parksville the required building permit and engineering fees and the development cost charges of $2.8 million. As it appears that Council is determined to proceed with the supportive housing and shelter project in a completely inappropriate location, we wish to leave the land in its current form and withdraw the subdivision application. So that's the letter, and as a result, I would like to ask a mover and a seconder for a motion to remove the staff report from the agenda and to receive the correspondence. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? All those in favor? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. Just a comment that I'm having a hard time reconciling this threatening letter that we get today from a group that at the public hearing was being represented as somebody that expressed care and concern for the community, and now they care so much about the community that if they don't get their own way, they're going to leave the land vacant to the detriment of our downtown and the rest of the city. I'm just having a hard time reconcile how you could care so much about the city and at the same time threaten to do this.
Anybody else have any comments? Councillor Burton.
This has been a significantly stressful time, I think, for all of us. Trying to reconcile providing a supportive housing concept for people in need in our community, and also trying to further development and look after the best interests of the community from that perspective. I'm really tired of threats. I'm really tired of I don't understand why a group of people who have a lot can deny the needs of people who have nothing. And it troubles me. The divisiveness in our community troubles me. I've not said a lot about this subject over the time that we've been dealing with it. I have been supporting the 222 Corefield supportive housing complex going forward. And I guess it is my hope that at the end of the day, when the data and the fact collecting and the examples of successful supportive housing concepts in other communities is replicated here, that we would be able to pull our community back together again and get on with the work of the city. We've had our agenda hijacked by this project, and I hope that after tonight we can put this to bed and carry on with the work that we were elected to do.
Councillor Beal and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, and I'd really like to thank Councillor Burden for his thoughtful comments. And I will say I too was disappointed seeing this letter, and I do encourage people here, if you don't know the facility, I just can't help but think about Uplands Walk, which is in Nanaimo, in North Nanaimo, and it is immediately, not across the street, but it is immediately next door to a very lovely, elaborate seniors village, seniors complex. It's beautiful. There do not seem to be issues there. It is also adjacent at the back to the public library with its many children's programs. There does not seem to be a problem there. It is across the street and maybe one house over from a school, and again, there aren't problems there. And if you go by, it is a beautifully kept building. It looks fine. And from all the reports, when you compare concerns that people had before it went in and what the concerns are now, it has dropped to minimal. So I am disappointed, and I'm somewhat surprised that people who are involved with developing something of this nature would not be aware of the actual research that's been done. And I too hope that as we move forward, and I understand maybe this is like a pause button, but if we can bring ourselves together, bring this community together to see what can be done, what should be done to build something that we can be proud of and that encourages the people who live there to also take pride in it, that we can move forward with other developments, because we do need a range of housing in our community, just as that's true for all communities. So that's enough from me.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do understand that that the community did support a subsidized housing, so I don't think there's anyone in the community that doesn't believe that housing is required. It was the type of housing that was discussed. And I have to say, I'm not upset by this letter. It's not my business to determine who does what and when and how, and it doesn't hurt my feelings as a councillor one way or another. Thank God we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. People can do what they like. We make our decisions. And we move forward. Many times this council doesn't support one another, but hopefully it's not something that you carry home with you afterwards, because, good God, you wouldn't get far if that's how it went. We have to let things go. And so I don't feel that being here and giving my personal opinion about how someone wrote a letter to council has any value. And I don't believe that that belongs in what I believe is a democratic process. I think they have opinions. I think they have a right to those opinions. They own those opinions. And I don't think it's up to council to disparage that. So as far as I'm concerned, people do what they please, and I'll accept that, and I'll move beyond it.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. I'm not going to add anything to what's been said tonight. I want to wait for the court decision to be made, and after the court decision is made, I'll have a lot to say, but not tonight. So back to the motion of receiving the letter and removing it from the agenda. We have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Burton, Councillor Oates. Oh, we took the... Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? That's carried. Okay, the next report. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding consideration of a development permit for a 4-story apartment building on Dogwood Street at 253, 259, 263, and 273. First of all, I need a mover and a seconder for the 4 recommendations. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Russell, if you would, please.
Certainly. The subject properties are located within the multi-unit intensive residential development permit area number 4, a designation to ensure a high quality of site and architectural design which respects surrounding uses, encourages the incorporation of energy and water conservation principles, etc. The application in this particular case is to facilitate the form and character or style of the buildings, the landscape architecture, and the site layout and design. The building has been designed by a registered architect, and the landscaping has been designed by a registered landscaping architect. The application was presented to the advisory design panel on August the 9th. The applicant has since addressed a number of the items identified by the design panel, and the applicant has requested that the application proceed directly to council for consideration of permit issuance, and the permit is attached this evening for council's consideration of issuance.
Questions for Mr. Russell? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I know it's not included in the motion, but this is rental property, correct?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Powell, yes, as part of the prior rezoning application, the applicant has registered a restrictive covenant that puts in place a 10-year agreement for rental. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, and thank you very much for a very detailed report. It's much appreciated. Not surprising, though. As an aside, I heard some additional compliments of our planning and building inspection department recently when I was out in the community. I actually want to make a little comment and a nod to Kara McDonald, landscape architect, who is here in the building this evening. I loved that in here the vision that having some hardscaping, having a plaza that accommodates wheeled toddler push toys, chalk art, and games like hopscotch and Foursquare. Having worked with kids for many, many years, I do see and appreciate the need for some hardscaping for bouncing balls and other such things. So, but it was an absolute delight to read that in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, and maybe through you to Mr. Figuera, we had requested a traffic calming report for the Dogwood project, but we didn't. What happened was we got a report on the highway instead. Remember, the report was on the Highway 19A there instead of Dogwood.
Mr. Figuera, do you remember that? I don't.
So I'm just wondering if we can get the report for traffic calming on Dogwood, not the highway.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall now. I know one was done, yeah. And there was comments on the intersection of Dogwood with the highways. I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah, as well as the traffic calming,
yeah, I'd have to go back and review to see if it had, had comments on the actual Dogwood to Bay direction. Mm-hmm. I'd have to see there, but I don't recall the report identifying any issues that those roads couldn't handle, but I'd have to really take a look again to see.
Thank you. Yeah, I bring it up because that had come up from the community. It was actually in the reports from the open houses.
Right.
And we had brought it up, and then, but I guess you weren't here, so I don't think you would have heard that. So just wondering if we could just clarify that, but not right tonight, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a mover and a seconder. No more comments from questions from Mr. Russell. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right, the next item is the 2018 Fall Grant and Aid applications. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on this issue regarding this particular Fall Grant and Aid applications? I know there's a timeline on this. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an item that comes before Council twice a year, and in accordance with the policy, there's $2,500 available in the spring and then also in the fall. This is for the fall section or session for grants and aid. In this round, the city received applications from 5 nonprofit groups with a total ask of $5,530, and recommendations are per the agenda.
So I'm going to call the vote, and then I'm going to name the lucky councillors that are going to do this. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried, and I nominate Councillors Beal and Powell. And I want to repeat that I believe that there are deadlines on this, so you might want to check with staff first thing tomorrow morning. Thank you. Okay, once again, Mrs. Kaler, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the recommendation that's coming before us, the Community Park Master Plan Implementation Strategy. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Oates. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Yes, thank you, Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not the only staff person, obviously, who had a lot of work put into this, so several other staff did sign this report as well. I'd just like to point that out. In order to meet the agenda deadline, we did not provide a copy of this report to all of to the 3 members of council on the committee, so they may also wish to make verbal presentations at this point to council. As a background, the committee was formed to look at the Community Park Master Plan implementation process and met monthly, actually twice in 1 month, every month from April to September. And this report includes recommendations from that committee as to the short-term priorities, but also includes an amended listing for the medium and long-term actions moving forward as well. There are 61 recommendations that were made by the VIU students in the Community Park Master Plan, and the report includes the prioritized actions over the next 5 years, or what we were considering short-term, and recommendations are per the agenda.
By the way, I want to congratulate staff. It's an excellent report, and thank you to those members of council who worked on this project. It's a very good project. Okay, I think the first recommendation is that it be received. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? We've received the report. Are there any other recommendations? Councillor Burton.
So I would like to move 2 more. One is that council approve the recommendations from the Community Park Master Plan Implementation Committee as set out in the report dated September 6, 2018. And the second is that staff be directed to include the recommended community park projects in the 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan. Yes, they can.
Do I have a? Okay, it's seconded by Councillor Oates. Any other comments about the recommendation? Do you want to elaborate a bit, Councillor Burton?
I don't really, other than to say that that it was from the inception of the awarding of the contract to do the work to Vancouver Island University master planning students to the development of the report. It's been a great process. My thanks also to the staff and my fellow councillors that participated. I think we've done an incredibly thorough job of taking a look at the community's greatest asset and ensuring that it remains the greatest asset going forward, with improvements to some of the amenities and holding the status quo on things that are critical to hold the status quo on.
Okay, seeing no. Oh, you have a question? Comment?
I'd just like to also add my thanks to fellow councillors, and I would request that thanks be extended to those members from the Parks Board that also took part, because their input was invaluable. So, and thank you very much.
Great job by everyone concerned. This is going to be a future very important document as time goes by. Okay, I'm going to call the vote on the two recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay. Members of council, we are into the final adoption of 8 bylaws for final adoption. I can take them all together. If there's any objection? Councillor Salter? The one on, which one? Number 3? Okay, so with the exception of number 3, I'm going to call the vote. First of all, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Now, on item number 3, the Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw 2018, number 1547. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? One is opposed. Thank you. That is carried. Okay. So now I need a mover and a seconder pursuant to Section 91C of the Community Charter to proceed to a closed meeting. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burton. We are 5-minute break.